Lavra adjusted her helmet and glanced at Ethan across the dusty training grounds. She held the reins of her massive warhound, a creature bred for speed and strength. Ethan stood beside a smaller beast, a young desert drake that barely reached his waist. The drake's scales shimmered bronze in the afternoon light, and its eyes tracked a passing hawk. Ethan's hands trembled as he stroked its neck, trying to calm both himself and his companion. Lavra raised an eyebrow. "Is that all you can manage?" she asked, her voice carrying easily in the dry wind. "You look like you are afraid your pet will bite you," she clicked her tongue. The warhound growled low in its throat. Ethan swallowed. He had learned to ignore her taunts in small doses, but today he felt them burn in his cheeks. "I am fine," he said softly. He tightened his grip on the drake's harness. "Ember and I are ready," his voice wavered. Lavra laughed. "Ready? You? With that runt? All right, let's see how you fare." She motioned to the trainers, and the small crowd of watchers stepped back. The arena was a rough circle of compacted dirt, surrounded by low stone walls that marked the edge of the field. The Grand War Games were to be held here in 2 days, but the trainers held practice matches for novices now. The trainer called, "Beast and handler ready." He stood between them. Laura's warhound snarled, its thick armor plating clinking as it shifted weight. Ember the drake hissed, showing tiny, sharp teeth. Ethan's heart pounded. He remembered the old books he had studied at night, stories of clever hunters who used traps and teamwork to defeat bigger foes. Lavra whispered to her beast, and it lunged forward. She leaped onto its back with ease. Ethan had no saddle, but he leaned close to Ember's neck and whispered too. Ember reared back, spreading its leathery wings. Ethan felt hope flicker. Laura's hound charged. Dust blew up beneath its heavy paws. Ethan heard a crackle from beneath his belt. He pressed a small lever and threw a handful of sand at the hound. It brought up its armored paw and shook the sand away. Ember charged too, though he was much smaller. He ducked under the hound's belly and snapped at its heels. The hound turned with surprising speed, and Ember skidded. Ethan jumped off before his drake could fall. He tripped on a stone. Ember bounded away, then returned with a chirp that sounded like a laugh. Lavra smiled. "Told you so." She rode the hound closer to Ethan and Ember. The trainers tilted their heads. Ethan felt the eyes of the young warriors behind the walls. They whispered and pointed. Ethan felt anger rise. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small coil of rope. Last night, he had spent hours braiding it himself. He tied one end around Ember's leg and the other to a rock. Now the drake had a tether, but could still move enough to fight. Lavra watched. "You really think that will help?" She raised her hand and signaled her beast. It charged again. This time, Lavra held a whip in one hand. The whip snapped against the air. The hound leaped high, landing on a boulder at the arena's edge. Ethan used the moment. He darted forward and slid under the boulder. Ember followed, silent and quick. The hound turned, but the rope yanked Ember aside just enough to avoid a massive claw. The rope snapped taut, and the drake swung its head like a hammer. Its snout hit the hound's jaw with a sharp crack. Lavra cried out. The hound stumbled. Its armor cracked. Ethan seized the moment. He grabbed a metal shard from the ground. It was part of an old broken spear. He scooted behind Ember and whispered, "Now." Ember roared and lunged at the hound's legs. The hound lost its balance and fell. The spectators gasped. The trainer blew a whistle. "Stop!" he shouted. He ran forward, waving his arms. Lavra guided her hound back. Ember and Ethan remained still. Lavra jumped off the fallen hound. She brushed dust from her armor. Her face was red, but her eyes glinted with anger. Ethan's chest rose and fell with rapid breaths. Ember sat by his side, panting. The trainer stepped between them. "Impressive," he said to Ethan. "Your drake is clever, but remember, the war games will test more than tricks. They will test courage and endurance." He waved and turned away. Lavra crossed her arms. "You got lucky," she spat the words. Ethan shook his head. "Not luck," he said firmly. "Skill. Ember and I know each other." He offered her a nod. Lavra scoffed and turned toward the crowd. She raised her voice. Did you see that? A rookie almost. Beat my champion warhound, pathetic, the crowd murmured. Some laughed. Others whispered support for Ethan. Ethan's fingers itched around the shard. He felt a new strength. He had trained hard. He had studied tactics from ancient texts. He had formed a bond with Ember in secret. And he would not let Laura's mockery break that bond. The trainer called everyone to clean up. Lavra mounted her hound and left the arena. Ethan led Ember back to the stable area. He unfastened the rope and let Ember stretch his wings. A young woman with a clipboard approached Ethan. You did well, Ethan. I watched your moves. A clever feint and a good use of terrain, she smiled. I will recommend you for the war games. She wrote something down. Good luck. She walked away. Ethan patted Ember's flank. We will show them, friend. We will show them all. Ember cooed softly. The setting sun cast long shadows. Laura's laughter still echoed in his mind, but he pressed it away. He walked toward the barracks where he slept. He thought of tomorrow's lessons. He planned to build more traps and learn Ember's strengths better. He would start early before the sun rose. Lavra would have more to mock, but instead of feeling shame, he felt excitement. At dawn, Ethan crept into the training yard. The ground was still cool. Ember greeted him with a chirp. Ethan carried the old books he had borrowed from the library. Dusty tomes of battle history, drake handling, and trap making. He spread them on a wooden table under an awning. Lavra arrived, dragging her hound behind her. She sneered. Back for more schooling? She asked. Afraid you will forget what happened. Yesterday? Ethan looked up. He smiled politely. I learn best with practice. He opened a book. Care to join me? We can swap tips. He pointed to a page with diagrams of pit traps. Lavra looked at the page. She laughed. I do not need traps to win. I have strength. I have my hound, but you go ahead. She threw her head back. Have fun with your reading. She stalked away. Ethan did not stop. He read the diagrams. He measured some leather strips. He tested knots. Ember nibbled some dry meat and watched. The trainers passed by and nodded. One young man asked questions. Ethan answered kindly. By midday, Ethan had crafted a small trap device with a trigger plate and a net launcher powered by springs. It looked crude but sturdy. He showed it to Ember, and the drake tapped it with his snout. Good job, Ethan praised. Tomorrow we tested on sandbags, then on moving targets. Ember made a happy sound. He nudged Ethan's hand. Later, Ethan visited Ember's stable. He washed Ember's wings with cool water. Ember closed his eyes and leaned into the touch. Ethan hummed the soft tune. He whispered, We will do great things, Ember. Then he paused. I hope Lavra learns respect. Ember chirped and Ethan laughed. That night, Ethan lay on his cot and read stories of heroes who overcame stronger foes through cleverness. He closed the book and gazed at the ceiling. The words of an old war hero echoed, Strength wins battles, but wisdom wins wars. He smiled and drifted to sleep, dreaming of the day when he would stand tall in the grand war games and silence every sneer, including Laura's. Ethan woke early, before the sun rose over the desert horizon. The sky was dark and the air carried coolness. He dressed quickly, careful not to wake the other trainees. His cot creaked softly as he stood. He gathered his trap device in the leather pouches that held spare springs and small metal parts. Ember, his young drake, greeted him with a soft chirp, pressing against his leg. Ready for more work? Ethan whispered. Ember tilted his head, eyes bright. Ethan led Ember out of the barracks and through the quiet camp. The guards nodded as they passed. A few windows glowed with candlelight. Where early risers studied tactics or practiced weapon drills, they reached an open area with sandbags piled in the center. Ethan placed the trap device on the ground and arranged a rope to anchor it. He set a trigger plate hidden under a layer of loose sand. Then he tapped Ember's side. Test time, he said quietly. Ember stepped forward, curious. He placed a foot on the trigger plate, and a net shot upward in front of him, then fell back, tangled around the sandbags. Ember shook his head, disentangling himself and stepping out of the net. He seemed amused. Ethan laughed. Good job, Ember. That should work on bigger targets, too. Ethan then moved the device behind the sandbags. He placed a flag on top of the sandbags to mark it. He guided Ember around. Together they circled the device like hunters tracking prey. Ethan's heart raced as he crouched low. He waited until Ember was behind the bag, then slipped away. Moments later, Lavra and her warhound arrived. Lavra yawned and stretched. "Early?" she asked, spotting Ethan. Ethan nodded and stepped behind the sandbags. "Testing a trap. Want to see?" He smiled politely. Lavra glanced at the sandbags. "Fine, show me." She mounted her warhound and steered it forward. The hound charged at the sandbags. With a roar, the net flew up and wrapped around its legs. The metal springs clicked as the net tightened. Lavra cried out and slammed her heels into the hound's sides. The beast struggled, stamps its armored paws. Lavra lost her balance and fell into the sand. Ethan rushed out and pulled the net's release lever. The net opened. The warhound shook itself free and stood tall once more. Lavra scrambled up, brushing sand from her armor. She glared at Ethan with fury. "You cheated!" she hissed. Ethan lifted his hands. "It's fair use of tools? You rely only on brute strength?" "I use minds and tools." He stroked Ember's scales. "Different skills?" Lavra spat. "I don't care about your tricks." Ethan remained calm. "Other warriors use traps in real battles. Doesn't make them cheats." He bowed his head. "I train to win with any means." He turned away. Lavra kicked sand at him and rode off. Ember chirped softly. Ethan patted his side. "All right, back to work." He returned to the trap device and adjusted the spring tension, making it stronger. Then he taught Ember to spot triggers. Ember pecked at the hidden plate until Ethan smiled. After sunrise, the training began. Trainees faced each other with small beasts and wooden swords. The trainers held lessons on formation tactics and creature handling. Ethan watched and took mental notes. He learned to read opponents' body language and to guide Ember's attacks strategically. At midday, they practiced moving targets. Trainers released mechanical golems to run across the field. Trainees had to trap them or guide their beasts to tire the golems out. Lavra and her warhound led the field. The hound smashed through golems, its powerful jaws crumbling metal. The trainers praised her. Lavra shot Ethan a smug look. Ethan and Ember waited their turn. When the golem approached, Ethan triggered his trap remotely with a cable. The net caught the golem's legs. Ember charged and bit its ankles. The golem stumbled and stopped. The trainers nodded in approval. One trainer approached Ethan. "Your timing is good, and your Drake has speed." He patted Ethan's shoulder. "Keep this pace. You might challenge even the best." The other trainees looked impressed. Lavra glared. She mounted her hound and stormed away. Ethan shrugged. That afternoon, Ethan returned to Ember's stable with fresh water and feed. Ember pecked at dried fruits, making happy sounds. Ethan rubbed Ember's neck. He remembered Laura's defeat of the hound. He felt a quiet pride. Suddenly, a messenger boy ran toward him. He wore a blue armband with the king's seal. "Ethan Green?" the boy called. Ethan stood. "Yes?" The boy handed him a scroll sealed with wax. "By order of the Lord Commander, you are to present yourself at the Royal Pavilion tomorrow at noon. A trial by beasts and mind. Prepare accordingly." The boy turned and sprinted away. Ethan stared at the scroll. Ember nudged his hand. "A trial by beasts and mind," Ethan whispered. He broke the seal and read. The Royal Pavilion was where the grand War Games judges watched challengers. "This is my chance," he said, his voice trembling. "We must be ready." He ran fingertips over the words, then refolded the scroll. He tucked it in his belt. As evening fell, Ethan and Ember practiced one last trap. He tested it on a wooden target that swung when struck. The device caught the target and held it. Ethan grinned. "Ready, Ember? Tomorrow we show them everything." "We have." Ember CHIRPD. Ethan settled by the fire outside the barracks. Others gathered around, eating stew and flatbread. Lavra sat across the circle, silent and brooding. Ethan avoided her gaze. He stared at the flames. He thought of his father's words. Courage comes in many forms, son. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is loud. But it always comes when you believe in yourself. His father had fought wars long ago. Ethan touched a pendant on his neck with his father's crest. He closed his eyes. He pictured the royal pavilion, tall columns, banners. Streaming, judges perched on high seats. He imagined Ember striking with speed and his traps outsmarting the mightiest beasts. Suddenly, Laura's voice cut through his thoughts. Don't get your hopes up. By noon tomorrow, you'll be begging for mercy. She rose and stomped away. Ethan exhaled. He opened his eyes and met Ember's gaze. We'll see, friend, we will see. In the quiet night, he dreamed of the duel ahead, of the roar of the crowd, of Laura's face when she realized she underestimated him. And he dreamed of victory. That came from heart and mind, not just muscle. Early morning sun touched the edges of the royal pavilion, painting the tall columns with gold light. Ethan adjusted his belt and checked Ember's harness. The scroll from the Lord Commander lay heavy at his side. It said the trial would begin at noon and would test both beast and handler in strength, wisdom, and heart. Ethan looked around the courtyard. Warriors in bright armor moved into position. Exotic beasts from all corners of the realm paced behind iron gates. Ethan's heart thumped. He thought of Laura's mocking face and felt his resolve harden. A trumpeter raised his horn and blew a sharp call. The gathered crowd fell silent. The judges, dressed in dark robes, took their seats on a raised platform. Their faces were hidden. Beneath hoods, the master of ceremonies stepped forward. His voice boomed. Welcome to the trial of beasts and mind. Each challenger will face 3 tests. First, a contest of strength. Then, a test of cunning. Finally, a trial of compassion. Handlers may use their beasts as they see fit. Good luck to all. Ethan led Ember through an archway onto the trial ground. The first test lay before him, a giant stone golem tethered by chains. Lavra stepped out next, her warhound snarling. Ethan felt eyes on him. He touched Ember's neck. Ember chirped softly and shifted forward. The golem raised a massive stone. Club, Laura's hound attacked first, jaws snapping, but the golem's armor deflected the blow. The golem swung its club down. The hound leaped back with one powerful bound. Lavra gritted her teeth. Ethan called to Ember. The drake ran around the golem's legs, pecking at its joints. The golem stumbled and raised its club again. Ethan recalled his trap device. He pressed a small hidden lever, releasing a net from Ember's harness. The net shot out and wrapped around the golem's knees. The golem crashed to the ground, chains rattling. The crowd gasped. The judges nodded. Lavra glared at Ethan. The golem rose but could not move its legs. Ethan clicked another lever. Transparent wires lifted the golem's feet off the ground. It hung suspended, unable to strike. The master of ceremonies declared, Test 1 complete. Victory by ingenuity. Next was the labyrinth test. A maze of high walls stood at the far end of the field. Handlers had to enter and lead their beasts to the center, where a flag awaited. Ethan and Ember approached the maze entrance. Lavra followed. Lavra charged inside, her warhound at full speed. Ethan waited until the warhound vanished around the first corner. Then he dove for a small hatch at the maze wall. Ember peered inside. Ethan crawled through and dropped onto a hidden path that led under the walls. He looked up and saw the maze floor far above. Ethan climbed a ladder inside the tunnel, emerging near the maze center. Ember fluttered up on small footholds. Lavra stormed into view, panting, but the center was empty. Lavra searched, shouting for her hound. Ethan held the flag high. Laura's hound burst around a corner. Spotting Ethan and Ember, it lunged forward, but Ethan waved the flag. Ember flapped its wings and cooed loudly. The hound paused, confused by the drake's sudden reach. Lavra hesitated. Ethan grabbed her hound's harness and led it to the flag. The master of ceremonies announced, Test 2 complete. Victory by strategy. Finally came the compassion test. A wounded dire Volf lay on a mat in the pavilion, its leg broken. Handlers had no tools and only their beasts to help. Laura's warhound circled the Volf, snarling. Lavra folded her arms. Ethan approached slowly. Ember crouched low, lowering his head. Ethan knelt beside the Volf and spoke softly. Ember pressed against the Volf's side, offering warmth. The Volf's ears twitched and it yipped softly. Lavra frowned. She urged her hound to attack. The Volf whimpered. Lavra laughed. Save it if you like. It is just a test animal. Ethan ignored her. He reached into his pocket and pulled a clean cloth. He pressed it gently to the Volf's wound. Ember nudged a water canteen toward Ethan. The Volf drank. Its breathing eased. The judges whispered. The master spoke. Compassion triumphs. The trial is complete. Enter the pavilion. Ethan and Ember stepped forward. The judges rose and removed their hoods. The head judge, a woman with silver hair, smiled. Ethan Green, you have shown strength of mind, strategy, and mercy. You win the trial of beasts and mind. Lavra stumbled forward. No, this is wrong. She looked at Ethan with disbelief. The head judge raised a hand. Victory is not only muscle, it is heart and mind. Today you proved yourself. She handed Ethan a scroll sealed with the king's crest. Let this grant you entry to the grand War Games as champion of cunning, the crowd cheered. Ember flapped his wings joyfully. Ethan felt emotion well up. He bowed respectfully to the judges. He nodded to Lavra. She lowered her gaze. As he led Ember from the pavilion, the sun shone bright. He held the scroll in his hand. Tomorrow he would face Lavra again, but now she would know his worth. Ethan smiled and whispered to Ember, We did it, friend. We did it. Ember chirped back, and together they walked toward the training grounds, ready for the grand challenge ahead. The grand arena trembled with excitement. The crowd filled the stands, cheering and waving banners. Ethan stood at one side of the sandy field, Ember by his side. Across the arena, Lavra emerged, her warhound growling low. The judges sat high. In their seats, ready to begin the final duel, Ethan felt his heart race, but he took a deep breath and steadied himself. He remembered every lesson he had learned, from the dusty training grounds, the early dawn practice, and the trials in the royal pavilion. Ember nudged him, and Ethan placed a hand on the drake's warm scales. Ember's eyes met his, calm and ready. The master of ceremonies raised his voice. Final challenge. Fighter and beast. The first to remove the opponent's flag wins. Handlers may use any tactic, but no lethal force. He stepped back. Lavra barked at her warhound. The beast charged forward, its thick armor glinting. Lavra held a long spear and rode bareback. The warhound moved with predatory grace. Ethan whispered to Ember, and the drake flapped its small wings, leaping above the sand. Ethan had built a new device, a spring-loaded cage launcher, hidden in Ember's harness. He trusted Ember to trigger it at the right moment. The warhound closed in. Lavra aimed her spear at Ethan's chest. Any last words? She called. Ethan smiled. You should brace yourself. He pressed a control on Ember's harness. Ember dropped low and rolled aside. The cage shot out, opening around the warhound's legs. The heavy metal bars snapped shut, trapping the beast's lower body. The warhound roared, shaking the cage, but could not move. Laura's face twisted in shock. She tightened her grip on her spear and urged the hound forward, but it could not budge. Ethan moved forward. Keeping Ember between him and Lavra, he held his own flag high. The sand crunched beneath his boots as he approached the trapped warhound. Lavra leaped down and tried to free her beast. She pried at the lock mechanism, but it would not open without Ethan's release key, which he held at his belt. She looked at Ethan with fury. Ethan said, Would you like to concede? Lavra spat in the sand. She scanned the field. She saw Ethan's flag fluttering. She dashed toward him, spear raised. Ember hissed and spread his wings. Ethan stepped back. He drew out the flag and tucked it behind his back. Lavra lunged. Ember swooped down and grazed Laura's shoulder, knocking her off balance. She stumbled and Ember pounced, pinning her arm gently but firmly. Lavra cried out. The crowd gasped at the drake's unexpected move. Lavra froze, unable to reach her flag. Ethan moved quickly. He dropped to one knee and placed his flag on the ground. He tapped it with the tip of his boot. I win, he announced. The master of ceremonies blew his whistle. The duel is over. Victory goes to Ethan Green and Ember. Clever strategy and teamwork have prevailed. The judges rose and applauded. The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting Ethan's name. Ember chirped triumphantly. Lavra struggled against the gentle grip of Ember. Ethan approached and placed a hand on the cage. He looked at Lavara, whose eyes burned with anger and shame. Ethan offered the release key. "Thank you for the fight," he said, his voice calm. "I have learned much from you." He unlocked the cage. The bar sprung open. Lavra yanked free her warhound. The beast shook itself and nipped at the cage before turning away. Lavra stood, brushing grit from her leggings. She glared at Ethan. Ethan nodded once. "Well fought." Lavra hesitated. She clenched her fists and then lowered her spear. "You were prepared," she admitted. "I did not expect such cunning." She paused and then straightened her back. "I respect that." Ethan allowed a small smile. Respect is earned. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a simple braid of leather. He handed it to Lavra, a token of goodwill. The braid matched one Ember wore on his harness. Lavra stared at the braid. She took it slowly, then tied it to her saddle horn. "Thank you," she said quietly. The judges signaled the end of the event. Musicians played trumpets and drums. The crowd's roar grew louder. Ethan raised his flag again, and Ember spread his wings. Ethan lifted Laura's salute. She returned it with a nod. Together, they led their beasts around the arena in a victory lap. Ethan felt a warm pride fill him. He had not only won the duel, but had earned the respect of his greatest rival. As they exited, Lavra spoke softly so only Ethan could hear. "Your mind is sharper than your blade. Do not forget that." Ethan nodded. "Nor will I forget the strength behind your spear." He turned and walked toward the pavilion exit. Behind him, Ember gave one last triumphant chirp. The sun shone brightly on the battlefield, and the future of the grand war games lay before them. Ethan knew the real tests were still to come, but for now he had proven that heart, mind, and partnership could silence any doubt. The morning after the grand duel, the camp was quieter than usual. Many warriors had left for rest or to prepare for other events. Ethan woke before dawn and found Ember curled at the foot of his cot, breathing softly. He smiled and patted Ember's head. "Good morning, friend," he whispered. Ember opened one eye and let out a soft chirp. Ethan stood and stretched. Today was not a trial, but a day of honoring champions. He had been invited to a banquet at the royal pavilion. Ethan gathered his gear and fitted Ember with fresh leather straps. The drake's scales gleamed. They walked across the camp, passing other handlers who nodded respectfully. Some offered congratulations. Ethan returned smiles and nods. He reached the pavilion's courtyard. Long tables were set with fruits, roasted meats, and sweetbreads. Torches burned in sconces along the walls. Banners of kings and queens fluttered. The judges stood at the head table. Lavra stood among them. Ethan approached. The head judge rose and gestured. "Please join us, champions." Ethan and Ember entered. The crowd cheered lightly. Ethan sat beside Lavra. She dipped her head in greeting. Ethan offered a small smile. A servant poured fruit juice into his cup. Ember stood quietly at Ethan's side, his eyes bright. The head judge spoke. "Ethan Green, you have shown courage, wisdom, and compassion. You represent the true spirit of the realm. We honor you today." She handed him a medal with the royal crest. The crowd applauded. Lavra reached into her pouch and handed Ethan a small vial of desert amber oil. "For your drake," she said quietly. "May his scales shine bright in all battles." Ethan accepted gratefully. Ethan touched the vial. "Thank you, Lavra. This means a lot." Ember let out a happy chirp. Lavra looked at Ember. "He is a fine companion." "You serve one another well?" She paused and then added, "I hope we may face each other again, but as allies." Ethan grinned. "I would like that." They shook hands. After the banquet, Ethan led Ember outside. The sun set in orange hues. He opened the vial and rubbed a bit of oil on Ember's head and back. Ember closed his eyes and leaned into the touch. Ethan laughed softly. "Now you will shine." He stepped back and admired Ember. You have earned this, friend. Ember chirped and flapped his wings once. Suddenly a messenger arrived, panting. He handed Ethan a sealed letter. Ethan broke the seal and read. By royal decree, champions of the trial of beasts and mind are to be advisors in the War Council. Ethan Green, you are invited to join the council as a strategist. Ethan's eyes widened. Ember chirped excitedly. Ethan pocketed the letter. He looked at the horizon. Laura's silhouette appeared at the pavilion entrance. I heard congratulations are in order, she said as she approached. Ethan nodded. And I heard you will be there too? He tapped the letter. Sharpen your mind, Lavra. The council will need more than muscle. He winked. Lavra rolled her eyes but smiled. I will learn from you, Ethan, and maybe teach you a few things as well. Together they walked toward the council chambers. Warriors and nobles lined the path, bowing as they passed. Ember followed, flapping his wings. The future felt bright. Inside the chambers, a map of the realm lay on a stone table. Lords and knights gathered. The king stood at the head, his voice quiet but firm. We face threats from the northern tribes and the eastern dragons. We need fresh minds and brave hearts to guide our decisions. I trust our champions to lead us well. He glanced at Ethan and Lavara. Welcome to the council. Ethan bowed respectfully. Ember perched on a low stool beside him. Lavara took her seat. Ethan studied the map. He pointed to a valley known for ambush. We can set up traps and use fast scouts on drakes to watch the passes. The enemy will not expect us to guard small paths. He looked at the king. This will protect our villages and give us early warning. The king nodded thoughtfully. Excellent. We will implement your plan. The other lords murmured in agreement. Lavara added, and we can train warhounds to patrol the forests. They can chase down scouts if needed. She looked at Ethan. Your drakes and my hounds working together could be unstoppable. Ethan smiled. A perfect alliance. He felt pride and excitement. Ember cooed. That night, after the council, Ethan and Lavra walked back through the courtyard. Ember trotted beside them. Lavra paused. Ethan, I owe you an apology. She looked sincere. I judged you too quickly. I saw only weakness where there was strength of mind. You taught me that true power comes from many sources. Thank you. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. And I learned that strength is not to be mocked. You showed me honor in battle and loyalty to your beast. I respect that deeply. He paused. Friends? Lavar smiled broadly. Friends. She tossed him a small wooden token carved like a drake. It matched Ember's crest. Ethan caught it and laughed. I will carry this always, and you will have a token of the warhound. He reached into his pouch and handed her a carving of a hound's head. She accepted it. It will remind me of our bond and lessons shared. She tucked it into her belt. They walked on in silence, comfortable and content. Ember chirped at the moon. Ethan gazed up. We made a good team, didn't we, Ember? Ember nodded his head. They passed the pavilion gates. Guards saluted them. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. He had come from being mocked to being honored. He had won respect and friendship. And with Ember by his side, he was ready for any challenge. As they disappeared into the night, the pavilion lights glowed behind them. Their story would be remembered, how the quiet handler and his small drake outsmarted the fierce huntress and her mighty hound, and how respect and courage can arise where once there was shame. And so their legend began.